Alrighty, hey everybody, it's me again, I guess. Um, Welcome to the second part of the AWP 2025 interview series, where in the first part, I was being interviewed by Didi Anofina, who is this amazing writer, and is going to be a panelist with me at the AWP 2025 conference, in Los Angeles. So if you're down there, come and see us. And if you have no idea who I am, my name is Karen A. Parker. I am also a fantasy author, a speculative fiction author. I have an MFA in creative writing from UC Riverside Palm Desert, and I'm also a certified fiction book coach with Author Accelerator. And today I have the immense pleasure of interviewing Afrofantasy author Omari Richards. Hi, Omari.
Hi, Karen. Nice to be
Hi.
here.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Omari is the author of the Kimoni Legacy, and when is book two coming out? When's book two coming out?
Um,
You know?
Sometime between eventually and soonish.
Oh, soonish. Okay. I, I feel like that would be like flip though, like maybe soonish is sooner and eventually is, but eventually, eventually can happen anytime.
I'm still working out all the kinks in the first draft. So
Okay. All right,
as soon as
awesome.
that starts making sense, I can start playing on what the things about to come out.
For sure. And hit me up, honestly, anytime. I'd love to take a look. I need to finish the first one though. So still working on that. But anytime, any writing, anything. But yeah, let's get started. Just to give an idea for the folks who are listening or who are watching out there. I mentioned that you're an Afro fantasy writer, but what kind of stuff do you like to write? What tickles your fancy these days or in general?
Obviously, fantasy. I've loved fantasy since I was like what 8 years old or 8 years
Mm-hmm.
old when I started reading The Hobbit. That's the classic gateway into fantasy. But I also was reading Brian Jake's Redwall series, which is, if you haven't heard of
Yeah.
it, it's basically
Oh
about
yeah.
a bunch of mice and otters and badgers and hares with weapons killing rats and foxes
Yes.
and
Yes.
other vermin creatures. And it can get very, very intense, to be honest. I'm not sure if it was fully age appropriate, but
You
it
know
was
something like I have the same feeling. Like I read Redwall is amazing. Like if you haven't read Redwall, you should read Redwall, for those listening or watching, because it is epic. It's classic hero's journey. It's, if you miss like the Secret Lives of Nim or the American Tale and you just miss mice just running around and doing cool stuff, like
yeah.
that will tick all of those boxes. But yeah, to your point though about the kind of fantasy you write, I definitely see the Redwall influence of just like these really expansive historical epic sagas that influence your style and in your writing. I definitely got a lot of that when I was looking at the Kimono Legacy. And can you tell us a bit more about the Kimono Legacy and what inspired you to write about it? How maybe you were reading like Redwall and you were like, I could do this.
Well, the Kimoni Legacy is, like you said, Afro fantasy,
Hmm.
and I got into it mostly with the Redwall as the background, but I was really initiated into it when I was reading the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, and I was reading the
Ah.
second book, Eldest, and then Aragon and Ronan were having a conversation with Natsu, the only major black character in the book. And Roland said to Aragon when she was off screen, "Does she dye her skin?" And Aragon said, "No, it's always like that." And
Oh
then I thought, "We're
no.
acting like I've never seen a black character before."
No.
And and then
Uh,
and then my next thought was, "Oh, they were raised in the mountains. Natsu's people were raised in the desert. They probably don't have a lot of contact with each other." And then I thought about it again. It's like, well, I don't see many black people in fantasy either. You know what? I'll
mm-hmm.
just write one. And that kind of was the snowball effect that brought me down into this Afro fantasy adventure, which is basically loose meets
Yes.
Game of Thrones.
Yes, yes. I especially like the Game of Thrones aspect and just I love writing yourself into the story. That's kind of what I do with my fiction. I just didn't see myself in this stuff that I grew up with, and I wish that I saw more of it. So definitely simpatico there. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit on our panel as well, just seeing how that influences our work and influences the works to come. But on that vein, it sounds like you're juggling multiple things at once, as we might have chatted before. What's the most unexpected thing that's happened to you lately in kind of your routine, writing wise or otherwise?
Well, just the fact that, I mean, when you're thinking about writing and trying to outline a book, you can kind of hear the characters, you can kind of see them, but they're all just kind of like off in the horizon. But
Mm-hmm.
once you actually have them written down, the book is published, and you went through the final draft, suddenly their voices become a lot more clearer and more succinct.
Mm.
So that kind of makes writing the next book both easier and yet somehow harder because I
Mm.
outlined up until maybe book 3 or 4,
Ah.
and then after I actually finished book 1, I went to my outline for book 2 and realized this doesn't make any sense anymore. Like Maso wouldn't do this, Rizia wouldn't say that, Kama
Mm-hmm.
would be doing this, not that. So I had to just rejigger the entire book 2 draft because the
Oh
characters have
wow.
a yeah they've taken root in my head, and their presence is stronger in my imagination.
Mm.
So I have a better understanding of what they would do and how they would react to these situations.
Yeah.
Now I could just stick to my original draft, but then they wouldn't be those characters, and
Yeah.
that would be a disservice to everyone.
Yeah, no, I like to I like that you said that because everybody plans their novels and their stories a different way, but I just like the fact that your characters are like talking to like they're saying like we wouldn't do this, we wouldn't do that. Like you wrote this path and we're kind of sticking to it. I like that. And I
Yeah.
like that I like that it's keeping you on your toes unexpectedly so I would
Yes.
think. And in addition, I think I asked about the sequel to the Kimono Legacy, but are there any excuse me, are there any other projects that you're working on that aren't fantasy or that maybe you're like doing some experimental stuff on the side?
Right now I'm kind of sticking to fancy because the Kimono Legacy, it's like 748 pages, so I
Yeah.
kind of have to like, in terms of book 2, I have to make sure all of that ties into what's going on in book 2. So that's taking up a lot of my creative energy. I am working on I have 2 short stories related to the world of the
That's
Kimono
right. That's
Legacy
right.
coming out
Yeah.
in 2 different anthologies. One's coming
Congrats.
out, yeah, thank you. One's coming out on February 18th in the Magic and the Melanin anthology,
Oh,
and the
that's
other one
soon.
is coming out, yeah, and then the other one's coming out in March, and that is called Shapers of Worlds anthology, and both short stories take place several hundreds of years before the events of the Kimono Legacy,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
they kind of explore 2 different cultures that were mentioned in the main book, but weren't expanded on. So this
Hmm.
will give you a little glimpse of what was going on before that.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. And this is like a personal question here because I too am working on a huge fantasy novel with a huge world and I have plans to maybe like do a short story collection in the future. How do you navigate or how do you choose like what aspects of your novel that you want to turn into a short story for say an anthology or how did you go about that?
It was kind of accidental because
Oh.
when you are world building, you're basically creating like hundreds of different mini stories that connect to the larger story, and it's usually triggered by like a phrase or a saying or an event that the characters
Mm-hmm.
mention, and then you have to build up backwards. they have the saying in the book, "Oh, this is a mantis task." So then I have to go back and
Yeah,
say,
where did that
"Okay,
come from? Yeah.
yes. Okay. So, what does a mantis task mean?
Hmm.
Where did that term originate from? Is this the original meaning of the word? Does it mean something else? Who was the first person who said that? What clan were they affiliated with? What was that clan like? And so on and so on and so on. And then by the
Hmm.
time you get, and then by the time you circle back to where you originally started, you have maybe like 50 pages worth of material that are irrelevant to the current story, but you're like, that's actually pretty cool. Tell me more about this clan kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh man.
so for the short story, it was kind of like piling together the notes I created for that particular clan and just figuring out, oh, this could happen here,
Hmm.
and this could mean this, and that, and that could relate to that. So
Yeah, kind of
it's
like,
not
yeah.
it's not a linear process, but it's still really fun.
Yeah, it does sound fun. It kind of it makes me think of like leaving little Easter eggs for yourself. Like
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Um we'll kind of transition here and maybe talk about sort of bigger life event things and just conceptually. But one of the questions I had, and I think I don't know if we got to it with my interview with Dee Dee, but I'll ask it anyway. If you could delete one historical event from existence other than, January 20th, 2025, what would it be and why?
Uh, it has to be just one.
It I mean that was my question, but you can give more, certainly. I
Um,
imagine I imagine I know one of those events, but I'm not gonna say. I want you to I want to
I
see if
mean,
we're on the same wavelength.
the first one that always comes into my head is the quote unquote discovery of the Americas by the
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese, because that
Mm-hmm.
kickstarted a whole lot of suffering and all kinds of things we're still dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Um, I would probably give Malcolm X and Martin Luther King bulletproof vests
Yes.
and give Nat Turner AR-15s, but that's
Oh,
something.
yeah, I don't know. We'd propel ourselves we propel ourselves into a gun violence nation quite quickly after Nat Turner that happened. So you'll have to think about that. But I do see where you're coming from, being the history person that you are. Is there a specific like I know you said you like historical fiction and you do write these just really epic worlds and that have their own histories of this themselves. Is there a particular like period of history that you're interested in, or is it more like is it kind of like is on an as needed project sort of basis? And also, can you talk a bit more about your interest in just African mythology and what went into that for the Afrofantasy aspect as well?
I think like two major periods that I'm really interested in is the period of the Mali Empire in West Africa, because we hear a lot about Mansa Musa and his pilgrimage and that he was the richest man in the world at the time, probably ever, and so on and so on. But we really don't know a lot about the day-to-day activities of the empire. We don't really
Mm,
know like how he was viewed within his own by his own people, because everything we hear and everything we have documented about Mansa Musa comes from outsiders. So
mm,
the outsider's view of Mansa Musa is probably vastly different than the insider's view of Mansa Musa, because
mm,
I've been reading
mm-hmm,
several books that go into this time period, and Mansa Musa at the time he came to power, there was like this balancing act between the indigenous nature-based religion and the incoming religion of Islam, which was the religion of the elites at the time. Then Mansa Musa
ah,
wanted to make it more mainstream, and then there was a bit of pushback for that within the general population, because their view was, hey, Islam is your thing. Let us have our spirits and nature religion and everything like that.
Hmm.
So when he made his pilgrimage and spent all that money and came back in debt for the indigenous religion believers, that was seen as okay, he just sold out our entire treasury to appease these outsiders. So that's the kind of dynamic I would want to explore
Hmm.
more in historical fiction, because historical
Hmm.
fiction can help you bridge the gaps that historical facts can't. And my interest in African mythology just comes from the fact that it's really, really interesting. I read the Epic of Sunjata several times a lot while I was
Ah.
researching for this book, and that is just classic hero's journey. Sunjata comes from humble beginnings. He's cast out. He goes through several training montages. He gathers an army, and then he fights an evil wizard that took his throne. It's really cool stuff. Um,
Mm.
and I just love learning about how these different West African societies just view the world without European influence, as the veil, because they have this very a lot of them have a lot of the folk tales and mythology have this very harmonious view of the world. You have to live in balance with nature, not conquer it. You have to
Mm.
understand the spirits, not be afraid of them. So it's
Very
so
very
so
Pocahontas, every life, every rock, every tree and creature has a
yeah,
name and stuff.
yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah. So those
Animistic.
so yeah. So it's those kinds of insights that I'm really interested in, and the various lessons and idioms that come from those myths, which a couple of them, at least pieces of them, ended up in the book themselves, and within the book itself.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, as you're talking about the Epic of Sujata, which I absolutely need to read now. Like that's going on the top of the my giant reading list. Because I never heard of that at all. Like, what? There's a whole African epic that I haven't even heard of, but I've heard of like the epic of the journey to the West. Like,
Yeah.
why why haven't I heard of that? And then as you were talking, I immediately thought of like Marlon James, like Black Leopard, Red Wolf,
Mhm.
like that. I mean, I want you. If maybe you have met him, maybe you haven't yet, but like y'all need to like sit down and like just talk all things Afro fantasy, African, like absolutely.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook of of his book, and I was just like blown away with how dense in the world
Yeah,
building it was, and it
yeah.
was it was sort of very non-linear fashion. So I had to like press pause for a bit, because like I'm trying to keep up here. There's so much going on.
Yeah, I just peeked at like a chapter and I was like, oh, this is like I this is for my spirit. I need to like dedicate like time for this because this is going to be a journey that's going to change my life. It's amazing. Like the writing is amazing,
Yeah.
the voice is amazing, and just in general, I mean we're going to be talking about this in the panel, but Afrofantasy and all of these like indigenous storytelling practices are very oral. They're voicey, as uh some people might say. Like the voices are just so alluring and so communal, and it really invites you because that's what it was designed to do. Like that's how it used to be. It's that we were all around the fire, we were dancing, we were singing, we were participating, miming, poetry, all of that. It was just active art. But now we get to talk about it in the written word and on the page. And I love that we're both doing that, and Dee Dee's doing that, and so many other authors are doing that. It's really cool to see. But speaking of life in general, since we were talking about history and juggling all these different projects, what's one thing you do every day that makes you feel like you've got your life together, even if everything else is falling apart?
Um, Writing probably,
Probably writing. That's
because
the one thing.
yeah, because
But
it
you do
actually
that
got
every
me.
day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in some capacity or another, if it's just like outlining a vague idea, working on a scene, working on like a character sheet, or just consuming a story, it always helps me just it anchors me, I guess, because it really got me through like COVID and
Mm,
extended unemployment after I graduated from college and the economy was in the tank. And yeah,
mm-hmm.
so when in times where I had like no job, I was stuck inside, everyone was stuck inside. I didn't feel like I was stuck anywhere because in my imagination, I was like going through all these different worlds, going through all these
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
scenarios, meeting all these different characters, writing about it. And yeah, writing is what is
That's
lets
the
me know
one
I'm still
thing.
around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing. I've got my life together. I've got my stories. I'm good. I'm gonna keep writing. That's beautiful. I need to do more of that. I guess that'll help me get my life together. And speaking of writing, or just speaking of is like my segue. I need to stop that. But anyway, we're talking about writing and habits, and I wanted to know that, you mentioned the pandemic and just being stuck inside. Was there any like mindset change that just like helped you like unlock a new perspective for you in your life or in work, or has it really just been, the proof is in the pudding. The practice is the truth. It's the perspective.
I guess um I guess the major shift came when I joined TikTok during the pandemic because
Right.
everything up until the pandemic, I was like, yeah, I don't know what this thing is. I'm really not sure how to use it. And then I joined TikTok because there was, a lot of other people were on it, so I just wanted to see what it was about. And then
Rip
I ended
TikTok.
up on Black, right? And then I ended up on Black Book Talk, and then that showed me just how big of an audience and how much demand there is for Afro fantasy. Because at that time, I was like, I mean, I've never really seen Afro fantasy on the shelves, and if I have, it's only in like one or two places. Is there even an audience for this? Because every time I go into the African American literature section of bookstores, it's always nonfiction books about race or coming of age stories about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
race or romance stories that feature race as a primary factor, or it's about the hardened gangster finds love kind of thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Very Walter
so I
Mosley
was
and
like,
like crime and
yeah, yeah. So it's like, and like, is there even an audience for this? And then when I joined TikTok, I saw that there is this huge demand for Afro fantasy, science fiction, speculative fiction that features black characters. There's just people are like gnawing at the bit for more black focused stories that are outside of the sphere of race and American history and the sins of America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
hmm
that motivated me even more to make sure the book was finished because I was like, okay, I can really give people something that they are looking for. It's not just me. There's a bunch of other people who would want to read this. So that was very encouraging.
hmm So asking for a friend, the friend is me. Um um even though book talk maybe dead in the US with this impending
It's
ban
on life
from
support.
SCOTUS. It's on life support right now. What advice would you give to, my friend or someone else trying to break into the writing industry, and what's the advice you'd tell them to ignore? So for instance, I like TikTok and me, we don't talk. I have no idea what TikTok is. But I hear you talk about it, and um I'm like, I need to find my people. I need to find my audience. Like, but then I have to think about like skits or videos and like all that. And so it feels like yet another social media network that I have to master.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
but do you have any advice for, again, asking for a friend and for those listening or watching, how to utilize TikTok, or just how to break into the industry in general?
Um, I would say play to your strengths. If TikTok really isn't for you, then there are several other places. There is this new app called Spill, which is black
Hmm.
owned, and there is a growing there is a growing book subsection, and it's not as demanding. It doesn't You don't have to do videos. You just have to you can just post pictures or text. And then of course Instagram and Threads, which is like probably one of the larger audiences right now, where you can just post pictures, you can post small videos, but that doesn't necessarily have to be you. I'm on Threads right now, and I found a pretty vibrant book community there. But one thing I really have to emphasize is community is more than just being online.
Hmm.
Even if all these social media sites go dark, or they come under new management or whatever, there's always going to be people who want to read stories, who want to read books, and they want to talk about reading books. So you really have to put in effort in finding the community, even if it's like posting something in your local library saying, "Hey, I want to do a sit and read. Is anyone interested?" And I guarantee you, people will come.
Hmm.
Um, there's also making your own email lists, which I still need to work on, but that's like your own personal social media, because the people who sign up are there for you and your books, so you can just talk directly to them. And yeah, just I would say my main advice is build community wherever you can find it, wherever you can create it, and with that community, it can help you get to the next level. Because the main thing with the publishing industry is you have to prove that there is an audience for your book before you do anything,
Hmm.
whether you are traditionally publishing or self-publishing. You have to make sure that people are going to show up to read, and
Hmm.
so creating that community proves or indicates that yes, there is a readership here, there is an audience for this book, and then once you have that, you can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those who are, listening and watching out there, you don't need 10,000 followers on your social
Exactly.
media networks. Like you just like be a literary citizen and engage. I'm trying to do that in my own way. It might be that I shift to TikTok if TikTok doesn't go in a coffin and die since it's on life support right now. But yeah, just yeah, I take that advice to heart, and I live by that advice. Find community, build community, be community. I don't know, just as a slogan. Um, but I think we'll just about wrap up here, and I'm going to ask you the same question that Dee Dee asked me, and ask if you had 30 seconds to pitch why people should listen to this podcast, what would you say? I won't time you in 30 seconds, don't
um,
worry.
you should listen to this podcast if you're interested in listening to two people who are very passionate about arts and literature and storytelling. Just have, a very spirited and lively and comfortable back and forth. If you're looking for writing advice, if you're looking for advice on how to break into the publishing industry, or if you're just looking for a good time with virtual friends, this podcast is definitely for you.
Awesome. I like that. I like that. That's definitely all that and more on this podcast mini series as we'll call it. But we'll go ahead and conclude it there. Thank you so much, Omari, for being here, and thank you to everybody that listened and watched. And stay tuned for the final interview in the series, where I believe Omari will be interviewing Dee Dee. Dee Dee will be in
Yeah.
the hot seat next time. But
I'm reading her book now. It's really good.
yes, and again, I'm sorry I didn't finish the Kiboni Legacy. It
No,
is a
no,
meaty
no.
one, but
No, no, no. Take your
from what I've
time with it.
read, yeah, from what I've read so far, like just epic. Your I respect your book. Like I'm gonna give it the time and the proper like place to actually just like sit with it and read it, because that's what it deserves. It's magnificent. I love it. I love it a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.